we need more people like myself who are willing to just, okay, I'll just sit here and manage your ads, or I'll just sit here and manage your books, right? For more Black service-based businesses. Super big advocate for it. And it's a bigger market. 75% of the British economy is service-based, right? We don't manufacture anything in this country pretty much. So I feel like a lot of us are missing out in those opportunities.
This is Max. Welcome back to Black Income Creators, and today I'm with Masibu. Masibu, if you'd like to introduce yourself to our audience.
Hey guys, my name is Masibu Manima. I'm founder of Translate Culture. We're a digital marketing agency working with some of the fastest growing brands in the Black community, basically.
Where did you how did you get into it? What were you doing before?
Yeah, so I went to university to study business. I actually went to do finance, and my rationale was, if I end up working in a bank, that's where the money is. And that was my linear thoughts. And then since I started my finance degree, I realized, naturally when you start uni, they give you kind of a broad spectrum of different disciplines. And I discovered this thing called marketing, which I found was much more closer to my type of thinking, creativity, as well as I was good at numbers, but I was probably more creative than that. So I changed my course to a business degree, specializing in marketing. Studied, and when I graduated, I ended up getting a grad scheme at Nissan. What I learned very quickly, because I graduated in 2009, there was this thing called Twitter that had just launched, and digital marketing was pretty much a new discipline at the time, right? Because everything was very traditional. And being one of the youngest members in the organization, I thought, well, there's no way I'm going to move up the ranks if I try to do traditional marketing. At least I have a better understanding on things like Twitter. So I spent about 3 to 2 years trying to get into the digital marketing side. It was a new department, but eventually ended up leaving. But on the side, I always had a few side hustles. A few of my friends started some websites together. So I learned SEO, I learned all of that type of stuff. And then as I was going down my career, just build a reputation in my local area in North London. And then my wife had an Etsy store. She used to sell stuff on Etsy. I was helping her out, and I decided to blog about the journey. And then the Evening Standard picked it up. I think it was 2018. Called me a digital expert, which was great. And loads of people started to reach out. And then I created a WhatsApp group for my friends and, predominantly Black consumer brands that were trying to sell online because they saw the stuff I was doing for my wife. And in 2019, decided to leave my job and go full time. And coming up to 6 years now, and we're here. So that's kind of like how I got into it.
All right, so let's take a step back. I suppose some people might be thinking, what is digital marketing? Sure. Is it just social media? Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's broader than that. So digital marketing, I guess, is essentially what it says on the tin. It's essentially marketing digitally. So it can be online. It could be mobile marketing. So it could be, technically, if there was like a QR code outside and I scanned it, that is still digital marketing. The reason why I prefer digital marketing is because most of digital marketing is measurable. So you can actually see the impact that your campaign has had. So for example, if I send out an email, so email is another form of digital marketing, I can track how many sales I got from there. Whereas traditional marketing sometimes can be very scattergun and kind of like pie in the sky kind of thing. So to kind of explain it, digital marketing, essentially what it says on the tin, is marketing that is digital. Which means it is trackable. So that's social media, email marketing, performance marketing, which is what we do. So ads on platforms like Facebook and so forth. So hopefully that sort of explains it.
And I'm glad that you brought up blogging, because I think that's one of the sort of digital marketing methods that's often forgotten.
Yes,
so it's like, people blog, and I blog in a sort of different domain, and one of my blogs was picked up by The Independent. And suddenly I had, and I was like, I'd never really thought about, the blog as a, digital marketing tool, but it is.
It is. And I think it's one of those things where I guess we'll probably discover as we go through this conversation. It's one of those hard things to do because it's like, it's not an immediate payback. I think a lot of people like immediate payback, like I post something on social media, it goes viral, right? But blogging is a slow slog, right? And I'm sure you've probably been doing it for months and years, and then it gets picked up. But what the good thing about blogging, it just shows your way of thinking. You're able to articulate it and document it in written form. But yeah, it's an art that I wish I could add more time to do more, but it's definitely something that I think more people should explore.
I think the issue with blogging as well is that people write the blog, like you say, they expect it to go viral straight away, and then the blog that I wrote is like 5 years old, so it got picked up this month, but it was 5 years ago when I actually wrote the blog. But because the SEO was strong, it was enough that, you know, actually whoever was writing the article for the Independent could sort of like find the blog, even though it didn't actually have anything. So I think there is something around sort of people not realizing they need to go and revisit their sort of blogging and sort of refresh. They leave it. They're like, oh, I wrote that blog 16 years ago.
Yeah.
Done, etc. But okay, so tell me a little bit about the targeted kind of digital marketing that you do, because I tried to do Facebook ads once and I was like, I couldn't separate it by race. So I mean, it might have changed now because this was years ago, but you couldn't choose sort of like ethnicity. You could only choose gender, location, age, I think, with sort of like the ways that they'd done it, for example. So how do you manage to sort of like get into spaces where, you know, like the Black consumer is?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So it hasn't changed. So you still can't target by race. In fact, it's probably got even worse. But this is where the cultural understanding comes about, right? So for example, for a lot of the brands we're working with, back in the day, you used to be able to target people that are interested in Afro-textured hair, for example. Obviously through GDPR and various data protection stuff, that's one of the stuff that's been taken off. So now we have to be super creative. So for example, some of the US hair care brands that we work with that are typically targeting, so they say, a slightly older demographic, we look at people like, well, what type of 90s Black artists would those people be interested in? Yeah, exactly. So it would be like somebody who's interested in Erykah Badu is probably a Black woman, right? So versus Beyonce, who's probably much more broader. So so it's kind of having those cultural understanding and those nuances is you can kind of circumvent your way to still targeting that audience. But what's really changed, the power is now in the creative as well. So like the actual ads that you're running, with use of AI and stuff, it can actually target, you can go broad and target the whole country, but because you have a Black person in a creative, it would actually target a Black person. Like, that's how very clever these platforms are. And obviously the more ads you run, it starts to know your audience as well. So yeah, it hasn't changed, but there are you know, tricks that you can use to target that audience.
Do you need to be technical to be in digital marketing? Because I think that's another misconception, isn't it? That you need to have sort of some technical expertise.
You don't actually. I think digital marketing, like just like any marketing industry, is quite diverse. So we have members of our team who like a creative strategist who works with us, and her job, I mean, she's quite technical, but you wouldn't need to be technical to do that job in a sense. It's, you come up with concepts. So you would say, hey, for example, let's go back to this Black hair brand that we were talking about. We're going to target people that are interested in Erykah Badu. What's the first thing they need to see? Because the thing about digital marketing, especially Facebook ads or any kind of social media, you've only got 3 seconds to get my attention, right? So what can we convey? What message can we convey for that first 3 seconds? So that's a very creative task, right? So you got to think about the hook, is what we call it, right? How do you hook to people? How do you then keep them sustained through that 15-second video or 40-second video? So there's those kind of roles. Obviously there's graphic designers that work in the space, story copywriters, right? So I would say it's actually 50-50. It's more, I would probably say 60-40, probably leaning more to creative. Now, if you are technical as well on the other side and more, you know, understand data, then you've got a superpower because you can kind of play both. But in our team, we've got people that can do both. We've got people that are more on the other side of discipline, but it's all about complementing each other when it comes to helping clients with their campaigns.
Is it difficult to do the digital marketing for your own business?
For me, or just in general?
Yeah, for Translate Culture, because is it quite difficult to sort of do digital marketing for that?
I don't think so. I quite find it quite easy. I mean, we're fortunate that most of our sales comes inbound, so people see the work that we've done, and I think that's one of the key things about service-based businesses is your marketing. The work you do becomes your marketing. Now, one of the things we probably didn't do too much of, which I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, we just didn't shout very much about the great work we were doing until 3 to 4 years in. In fact, some of our clients were like, would put us on a live and be like, oh, Maz is the one that's running our ads. I think for me, it was just more, I really wanted to focus on building the foundation, because this now social media, is easy for people just to come on and claim that they know what they're doing, right? But the proof is in the pudding. And I think especially in our community, I just felt like it was super important that I was good enough, because a lot of us are investing our hard-earned money. Many of us don't have investors. The thing that I focused on, which I call our superpower, is trust. So I think we built very strong trust across the community, which means if we do make mistakes, we do get that grace, right? Because we've done right by our community over a longer period of time. So to answer your question, when it comes to digital marketing, you probably notice more now, we're now actively talking about all the stuff we've done in the past 5, 10, 15 years, right? Obviously the company's only 5 years, but I've been doing digital marketing for 15 years. So to answer your question, I guess, was it hard? Probably no. I just wasn't actively doing it, and probably didn't need to, because, we were growing really quickly. But now it's a lot easier because I've got all this track record that I can shout about, and it's an unfair advantage that I have, I guess, against, other agencies.
Yeah. And I think, to sort of like pick up on that point about trust. So, I'm a member of, I'm a villager with Quanda, and it's a charity where, and one of the biggest things is around the transparency that they have, which again allows trust to be built. So people are like, well, where is my money really going? And, people can, so I think Quanda is a really good example of trust. So I like that. I think it's really important. And then also in the Black community, when I was doing my MBA, I looked at sort of like Black women in finance, where they're having the same access, etc. And actually what I thought it was going to be like, the banks are all racist and that's why we don't have, access to investment, etc. But actually it was our lack of trust in the system that was the big thing, and our lack of trust in others. So Black women were the least likely to have a partner or be in a group, whereas white men always sort of teamed up and had 3 or 4 of them. Black women would typically be solo and have a lifestyle business. And it was mainly due to the fact that they didn't trust other people, so they didn't build those businesses in that way. And then they didn't trust the institutions. So I was kind of like, wow, trust is a huge thing for us, but you don't think about that sort of like at the start of a business, that how important trust is within your customers. I'm glad you have that now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, 100%. I would love to read your MBA. Do you do like a piece of work on it, or was it just? It was my
dissertation. I mean, I literally just skimmed through. I was kind of like just trying to get through. But I mean, I think, when you start any kind of piece of work or research, you kind of think you know the answer already. And I didn't. So in my head, I totally thought they were going to just say, well, banks are racist. And I was like, yeah, that's what it is. That's why we're struggling. And it was like, no, it's because we don't talk to people. We don't ask others to do things with us.
It's really fascinating you say that, and not to go on a tangent, but we can have this conversation offline because I'm super interested in this stuff. So we partnered with Lloyds Bank. They've sponsored our event a few times, and one of the key things that they found in their research is that we just don't trust banks, and most businesses, that's where people get their finance, right? So it's like you need to have a relationship with your bank manager. These are the unfair advantages that we have, and it's one of the key things that we've probably going to speak on. Is we have an event called Direct to Culture, which has been built was initially to help our clients lower their cost of acquisition, cost of ad spend, let's say, for example. But it's turned into this other event where we're trying to fight all these different barriers. And a lot of those barriers are down to lack of trust, lack of information, lack of distribution. And something I'm really big on this year is this concept of social capital. Right, this idea that I don't have to, it's almost like a social contract that I have with you, that you know that I'm going to do good by you because you can serve me and so forth. And I feel like other cultures tend to have that, whereas for us, we kind of almost got to explain that it's needed, right? But then but there were times in our history when we had that. So you think about Partner and Susu, when a lot of people moved from the Caribbean and Africa, because they didn't have access to the banks, they built those kind of credit unions and stuff like that. But that's a wider discussion we can have. But
No, I think partners is sort of very interesting because when my parents came here, in the 80s, they tried to do that. From South Africa, they tried to do that. It's called Stokveld there. They tried to do that here, and they struggled because people didn't actually have enough to then do it, so that it kind of got lost, which is a little bit unfortunate because it was there 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, I think, in this country. And then in the 80s, like you say, there was a recession in 2000, sort of like 2008, but there was a recession at the end of the 80s, 90s, so lots of people, I think, they lost that community build, etc., in the Black community, but you didn't see that loss in sort of the Asian communities, Jewish communities. They still kept going, but we somehow, unfortunately, I think we lost a lot of that in the 80s.
We did, yeah. And I could speak about this for weeks. So yeah, it's a very interesting topic. I think for me, building my business, kind of having that history was super important. So the trust element is key, and it's one thing that we kind of we thrive on.
So how big is the business now then?
In terms of staff?
Yeah.
Yeah, so staff, there's about 6 of us. So there's myself, there's Namat, so she just graduated from university. She's like paid social, so she manages all our Facebook ads. Very interesting story how she joined, which is really empowering to me. I mean, a couple of the brands that we work with, Plant Made, Ruka, she used to follow them. And yeah, so when we did, this is going back to the point you asked earlier, how do I digitally market myself? Because I was not really sharing a lot of it. In 2023, I decided to share that I was working with these businesses, and she saw it and she sent me a message and said, I didn't know you were behind these brands. I'm at university. I need to find an industrial placement. Come and yeah, she's been amazing. And there's a few others that joined the team as well, but we're growing as well, which is great. So we're a team of 6 and growing.
How much of your business now is sort of like US based compared to UK based? Because obviously you're talking hair brands, etc. That's a huge market, in the US.
Yeah, it's huge. So in terms of our client base now, we're about 40% US. It's probably going to be 80% in the next year or so. So I just came back from New York. And it's fascinating. I was having a conversation with one of our UK brands. So I went away on a family holiday as part of half term. And I came back and I realized all my UK clients, the sales sort of tanked because it's like, half term, bank holiday and all that type of stuff. And as much as we've been working with UK brands, I realized for the past 5 years, because they were Black consumer brands, we very quickly scaled them to America. So I probably have a much better understanding of the African American consumer and their seasonalities than the British one, even though I live here and it wasn't until we started growing brands in the UK specifically because, just because of the type of products they have, I started to notice this. So I came back and, catch up with a client and I was explaining to them, I was like, I didn't think about this in terms of our planning, but actually April, there's a 2 week in April where nothing
happens. Nothing happens.
So my goal is to, so I just come back from New York, met a few of our US clients there, a few of our US partners. That's where the growth of our business is going to grow. But also we do have, not all our clients are Black owned businesses because obviously the skill set is broad. And the big shift that we've had, and this is probably an exclusive to you, is the first 5 years I was focused on Black ownership, right? Really making sure that those of us that wanted to grow businesses and build, so helping Black founded businesses grow, right? And that's still a remit that will support people from our community as we grow. But what we also realize is actually we also must be good custodians to Black consumers, because not necessarily every product that Black people buy is Black owned. So we'll be doing our Black consumers a disservice if we didn't work with those brands that may not be Black owned, but they have the intention to better serve the Black consumer. And that's probably a bigger market that is reaching our people every single day. So we kind of started working in that parallel. And what that's meant is, we've been thought leaders with banks in terms of letting them know the kind of research that you just highlighted around the trust, the lack of trust, and helping them build trust. It's also meant that brands that are serving our customers are now thinking about, okay, what ingredients they should be doing. What are Black consumers really looking for? Safer ingredients, all that type of stuff. So we feed that information in this part of the product development process as well. So I know it's a long-winded question, but answer, sorry, but yeah, the US is a big part of that. And I always say to people this anecdote, which I said, this data that I said at my the first event, which is people don't realize there are as much African Americans as there are white people in England. When you think about it in terms of,
because they're like 13-14%, and then we're like 2%, 2.5%. So yeah, actually, so number wise,
yeah. If every African American moved to the UK, we would match the white English population. So people say the Black community is too small in this market. I mean, you can argue yes, maybe, and you can't scale to like tens of millions of pounds, but in the US is a bigger, and then there's Africa as well, emerging markets that are coming. So, but we're definitely expanding our global reach.
What could Black British business owners do better in the digital marketing space? What do you think they're sort of maybe not picking up what's happening in the US, or where are they sort of maybe losing a little bit of traction that they should be?
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good question. From a digital marketing perspective, and like I said, leaning into my experience with our US cousins, I would say be a bit more bolder and promote yourself. We're very reserved, I think, and I don't know, maybe we're just part of the British fabric now. We're just like, it seems a bit icky to sell yourself. But my friend Michael, who runs a platform, is sharing a lot of videos about we're in an age where that doesn't reward the shy people. There could be somebody who you're 10 times more qualified, who's just louder than you on social media, and they're going to get that job, right? Which is something that I had to learn. Is like, well, I've got this credential, and I'm telling my clients to be more out there. Why am I doing it? So I think that's one thing we need to learn, is around being more vocal in terms of letting people know what you're doing. Like, I've got an event, I've got this, and this. I know it's embarrassing sometimes, but you just have to be a bit more upfront. And Americans are just really good at that. The second thing, I also think it's around, and it's probably less around digital marketing, but more so, I think as a culture, it's a bit of a oxymoron or contradiction to based on what I've just said. I think we're quite good at marketing in general, right? Because we have the advantage, especially when we're speaking to our community, we have the advantage that we know how to speak to them. And also being ethnic minorities, you kind of have to translate other cultures. You have to also understand how the wider British culture works, right? So we're very good at storytelling, all that type of stuff. And I think what I would like us to do more is really building the full infrastructure of those businesses, right? So not just being the face of the business and being super good at marketing, like making sure that your supply chain is strong, right? So who's the person that's managing your ops needs to be very strong. The person that's managing your finance needs to be just as good as you are in marketing, because what tends to happen is we do very well, we get a lot of traction, and then things break in the back end, and then and then the narrative then becomes that Black businesses aren't serious, but partly it's because we're probably too focused on the front end. So the second part is really make sure the back end is also up to scratch.
And I think that leads into sort of like, customer service and the perception of customer service, particularly, more Caribbean, I suppose, than African, but there's still that thing of like, Black business customer service isn't where it needs to be, or even delivery. So I order a lot of things online. We are plant-made, brilliant. I get everything as expected. Others, it's been months. I chase. You know what I mean? So it's like you say, I've seen the Instagram, the TikTok, and I'm like, oh my God, that seems amazing. And then it's like, where's my product?
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's one of those things as well. I was reading an article somewhere which said, when we had the lockdown and the support Black businesses, a lot of Black businesses actually died very quickly because they didn't have the infrastructure and they had all these sales, right? And it's something that I'm big on boring businesses, right? People always say to me, man, you've helped these businesses make tens of millions of pounds. Why don't you have your own e-commerce store? Right? Well, my wife did, and we did very well, but it was stressful, right? One thing I'm trying to encourage is I call it the path of least resistance, right? Like it's okay to do the easier thing. Well, not easier, but the thing that's not sexy, right? So yeah, I'm a big advocate of that. And I think to answer the earlier question, we need more people like myself who are willing to just, okay, I'll just sit here and manage your ads, or I'll just sit here and manage your books, right? So I'm a big advocate for more Black service-based businesses. Super big advocate for it. And it's a bigger market. 75% of the British economy is service-based, right? We don't manufacture anything in this country pretty much. So I feel like a lot of us are missing out in those opportunities.
So how does somebody start working with you? I mean, take us through the process. So they're kind of like, do they typically come to you when they're in crisis? Do they come to you when they're a startup? When do you normally meet your customers, first of all? And then, like, how do you work with them? Just give us a flavor.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's varied across the years. I would say we've now, I'll probably talk about now and work backwards. So now we're quite picky in terms of who we work with, just because, the resources we have to kind of be super strategic. So we tend to work with predominantly 7-figure brands just because of our cost, our fees. It doesn't make sense to work with a brand that isn't generating that money. It just makes the relationship much smoother. So typically a brand would reach out to us and be like, hey, man, we want to grow. Here's our budget, here's the revenue we want to hit. And if it's the right fit, we'll take them on. Historically, it has been where people just reach out at any given point. Obviously, at the beginning, I was probably just taking on anyone, because trying to learn and transition. But what I found is in the middle where it got really hard is, and this is what we avoid now, is when a brand says, oh, we used to do 1 million, 2 million, 10 million. Now our revenues dropped to 1 million and we need you to get us back to where we were in 2020. Well, first thing I say is 2020 is a black swan moment, right? Like it's still good. Well, thank you. Hopefully it doesn't happen again from what happened in the world. But to that point, it's gone. Like it was a black swan moment. And we've historically tried to help those brands come back there, but what we realize is actually the truth of the matter is probably you just have to find your new normal. And we're now moving into a model where we're actually doing less retainer businesses. We're doing more rev share and partner with those partners that we believe are going to grow in the future, so we can have some of that upside. And we can afford to do that now because I mean, I was making a joke the other day to one of our clients. I was like, if we took 10% of your revenue versus what you're paying us, we'll be making 5 times more. And they're like, yeah, don't get any ideas. So I was like, but just giving a bit of flavor, in the sense that when you start a relationship, sometimes you don't know that you're going to be a success. So you just kind of say, okay, pay me X a month that I can pay the bills and pay the team. But now we're in a position where actually we know what we're good at. We know where the future is. We know what is trending. We know what brand has the right founder type infrastructure. With that brand, it might be worth maybe reduce retainer where we take 15% of revenue that we generate, right? So to answer your question, I think historically it was kind of like people send an email or make an introduction, but now we're kind of it's kind of like 7-figure. That's where the conversation sort of starts. If they're doing that, and more broadly, and then and then we figure out if it's the right fit, and then we start working.
Those that are sort of at the startup, say, so they're 5, maybe 6 figures if they're lucky. So what should they be looking out for when they are looking for a digital marketing company? What are the sort of key questions they should be asking? Because I think it's quite daunting as well. They kind of like, they get a lot of flashy, we can do this for you, we can do that. But what are the questions they should ask?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would say, this is going to sound really weird. I'm not a big advocate for agencies. I even did a video yesterday which kind of went semi-viral, where I talked about the death of middleman businesses. And I think we're different in terms of an agency, in the sense that we're using agency as a vehicle to serve our community. So if that changes and our community needs something else, we'll probably pivot to that if we have the right skill set and there's demand and so forth. So I would always be an advocate of, if you have the time, learn as much as possible to do it yourself. And because what happens when you learn is you can then start to ask the right questions when somebody tells you what they can do for you. The good news is when it comes to ads, these platforms are actually becoming a lot easier to use. So there's like, I always said this, that Facebook and Google long term, they're just going to want you to put your credit card in, get Maz out of the equation. They'll do it AI. And it's already happening in some aspects of it, which I actually don't mind, because the services we provide our clients are a lot broader. Because actually, as the systems become more automated, you're still going to need a certain expertise when things go wrong. It's okay when things go right. It's when things go wrong, they need somebody. So I would say try and learn it, really invest the time. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and I see this a lot, especially in our community, we shy away from the things that are difficult but also business critical, right? We want to do the things that, and a lot of us in passion industries. And I think, and I'm guilty of this, or have been guilty of this. I realized in order for me to want to grow my business, I have to improve my management skills. So, I had to take on less clients and really invest in management. So I would say aim at yourself, fail. It's better you fail on your own money, right? But at least then you know where you failed and you have some data. So when somebody comes and promises you the world, first question you're going to ask them, well, how are you going to promise me the world when you've not even looked at my ad account? That's what I always find fascinating. People say, I can give you, but you've not even looked at my ad account, right? So, and I think also be willing to make decisions based on gut. Like, you can tell when somebody's like a thing. So I would say, do it yourself. If you get stuck, try to, just make the investment, maybe a short-term investment of like, okay, we'll test you out for 3 months. And recommendations. Definitely get recommendations for people because there are some really good people. So another thing, you could reach out to Translate Culture, because we're actually building a network of smaller agencies. So if you go on our website and you apply, one of the things we have is, if your budget's too low, we say, are you happy for us to send it to a wider network? And what we do every other Thursday is we coach a lot of young digital marketers here in our community. So they come and, we get some food and we just talk, and I just show them how I built my business. Ultimately, they are more affordable options. And there's a young guy who 90% of his clients have been clients that I've turned away, but he's grown them to a point and he's so comfortable with it. He's like, well, Maz, when they get to this level, I struggle, I'll pass them on to you. Right. So we are building that network as well. And I would hope there's more of those. But first I'll say, try it yourself if you've got the scope. And just, so then you can ask the questions.
I think it was interesting what you said around sort of like, sort of 2020 and businesses saying, get us back to where we were around about that time. So we're on meetup.com. And the biggest thing is it's about events, but the events would be after work. People started working from home, so they're not in the center of London. So you're not going to get the same type of, event numbers that you were getting before. Meetup started losing sort of, traction. So they were like, what we'll do is we'll just put our costs up. You know what I mean? And so they lost even more, etc. And I think it was an interesting example for me of a business that couldn't pivot and say, actually, we're not in the same space that we were 5 years, 3-4 years ago. This is when it also happened. I think that's where a lot of Black businesses in the UK struggle, is like you say, they do one thing, and when they have to pivot because the consumer wants them to pivot, they find themselves unable.
Yeah, 100%. And pivoting is business critical, as you know. And I think pivoting becomes easier when you have a bigger vision than the business. If that makes any sense. If like, for example, us, for lack of a better word, pivoting to the consumer rather than just the Black owner, is because we want to serve our community. Even when we're serving clients outside of our community, we are serving our community because we become an example of a Black business that is delivering high quality services to the world, right? So then it's kind of, my vision has always been about what brand, what kind of leader, what kind of organization would I have wanted to work for when I was 18, going to university, trying to figure it out. So seeing that young people from a wide range of communities, to be fair. Our team's quite diverse, have looked at the work we've done and want to work with me and my company is amazing, right? So I think pivoting is easier when you know who your customer is and the vision that you're trying to deliver, and you're not stuck on this idea that this is the one thing I do, and when that thing no longer works, then you're sort of stuck, basically.
Let's talk a little bit about your transition from employment to being a business owner. So was it, you said you were at Nissan initially, and then was there another job, or was it?
There's another job, yes. I left Nissan 2014. Then I was at the British Medical Journal for 5 years and did really very well there. So I had a mentor. This is something I always tell people, is like the cheat code is mentorship. It's like there was this guy in my organization. He kept thriving at Nissan. He was getting promoted every single year. It was crazy. And I reached out to him and I was like, look, what do you do? Like, how can I think? And he gave me advice. And one of the key things he said to me is like, your job is to make your boss look good to your boss, to their boss, right? And for me, that was a penny drop, because when I went to my next job, the beautiful thing about the British Medical Journal, or the BMJ, was a very transparent company, right? You could see people's salaries, like everything was super, people's goals. So I already knew, as I got the job, my manager's 3-year plan. So what I decided to do is make sure that I worked on every single project that was high value. So I moved in 5 years, I got promoted 3 times, right? So that was super key. And that's something I want to always share with our community, that yes, there are certain institutions where there is discrimination and stuff, but there are also institutions where if you're good and you're on the right projects, you can move up really quickly. So what I learned from BMJ was, just that mindset of what is the end goal and attaching myself to that and delivering value. And then 2019 is when I left. And I made some bold decisions as well, which I always say to people, like, so I got married in 2014, 2015. We decided to move with my mother-in-law so we could save. So my element of, so for me, taking risk was, I kind of had quite a few safety nets, right? Which a lot of people, which culturally, thinking about moving with your mother-in-law is it's kind of a bit of it's something you wouldn't do typically in our culture. But my mother-in-law was very supportive in the sense that she realized, yes, that's part of our culture, but we're living in a world where that group economics is super important. She even gave me back my dowry. So when I went to knock, she gave it back. She's like, invest in that. So I had a very supportive family. So when the moment when I decided to make that leap, they were just like, well, if it doesn't work out, you can always go back, right? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And I was telling my team as well about decision making, measuring upside versus downside. Because the downside is, it doesn't work, I go back to my workplace. Where some people is like, well, they're thinking about all these different things that I can't pay my bills and whatever. Well, then you just get another job. So that was a very, it took me a while though, I'll be honest. I'm making it sound a lot easier. So I had to unlearn a lot of things and had to have positive confirmation conversations with my friends and stuff. But I created this model which allowed me to make a decision, was like, what's the worst that could happen? Right?
Yeah.
So that was super helpful.
And in terms of like your friends and family, are they typically in entrepreneurial spaces, or are they actually more in employment spaces? Because that actually has an impact on what you're being told, I guess.
100%. So I would say at the time we were all in very employed based stuff. And it's weird phenomenon. I don't know if this is a thing. I always ask people this question. I don't know if this happened to you as well, but you kind of do things at the same time with your friends. It's like you all get engaged around the same time. You all tend to get married, right? So as soon as one person leaves and starts their own business, then it gives the group the confidence, right? So for me, it was like having a few friends that took that risk. I was like, okay, if he can do it, I can do it, right? And then once I did it, others did it. So I would say now most of my friends, I would say a majority are entrepreneurs. Still have friends who obviously work in their career, But and naturally, because of my clients, you just start building a bigger pool of entrepreneurs as your network.
And what kind of boss are you?
Oh, that's a very good question. That's a good question to ask my team. I would say I'm quite. I'm very trusting, right? I give a lot of trust up front. My wife says it. I need better discernment. That's why I married her. She's the one that's got the discernment. I tend to live. I have, and I'm shifting. I have this mindset that people are inherently good or have good intention. That's it, right? Which has come back to bite me a few times. But so I tend to give a lot of trust to my team. Tend to give them as much autonomy as possible. But what I'm also learning is there's a balance that comes with that, right? In terms of what that means then is sometimes because I'm trusting them, they may then, when they're struggling, they're not necessarily going to ask for help because they feel like, oh, I don't want to let him down. When really it should be part trust, part coaching, which is what I'm learning. Kind of like, okay, let's check in, like, giving them autonomy, but also kind of coaching. So I would say, yeah, very trusting. I try to build a culture of, so I'm a Christian values. My business is built on those values. One of the values of my business is being an ambitious servant, right? Which sounds like an oxymoron, but that's how I see the world. Is like the best way to, the best gift you can give somebody is to serve them. And the ambitious side is basically me saying that I'm willing to use my skills to achieve ambitious goals with other people. And I think the best employees that work with us also kind of have that sort of mindset where there's an element of humbleness in the work that we do. So we get the fulfillment from the work, not necessarily the value that comes from it. So there's a nice balance. So yeah, I'm probably quite laid back in that sense, but I've also had to learn that that doesn't work with everyone. So you've got to kind of be a bit flexible in terms of how you manage different members of the team.
Yeah. And you mentioned sort of like supporting your wife with her Etsy business, but there were a couple of businesses. Is it like Mixtape Madness and Bespoke Money? So tell us a little bit about sort of working on those are the earlier projects I think that you did, and sort of the impact that you had on those businesses.
Yeah.
So start with the Etsy one because I didn't even know what she sold. What did she sell?
Yeah, so she sold African print homeware. So it was Bespoke Money. That was my wife's brand. So she's from Ghanaian descent. So she used to make these lampshades using Ghanaian kente print and stuff like that. And that was very interesting because that was just a hobby. And then I remember I wanted to start an agency, and she shut down the business a few years ago, by the way. But I remember wanting to help one of my friends, and I was trying to build this agency, and he was like, well, why don't you help your wife's business? So I was thinking, that's a very good idea. Although I felt a bit like, oh, okay, fair, like a bit of a thing, but I was like, he's actually right. How can I be trying to sell my services if my wife's business isn't? So I dedicated my time on that. So that was Etsy. So I learned the whole marketplace. I just figured out how we can grow herself. She was really good as well. She was doing research as well herself, so we worked really well together. And then 2020 is when she really blew up, because everybody was stuck at home. She was probably one of the more prominent Black-owned homeware brands, and we went to multiple six figures that year, so that was really cool. And Mixtape Madness was actually an idea of my good friend Andy and Eddie. They basically wanted to create a Spotify for the Black community where you can just go and watch and listen to your favorite mixtapes. And because I had already built a reputation in the community around digital marketing, because I was working at Nissan, they brought me on as a head of marketing. And that's when I learned SEO, because it was like, we had no money. We all put £500 to start this business and we weren't making any money. So I had to figure something out. And just through my research, I realized that search engines loved, especially Google, loved Wikipedia. So anything that was referenced on Wikipedia, it gave a higher ranking. So So we just went through every single UK artist and put our links on there, and then we got like 30,000 subscribers, which is growing really quickly. And then that's when I really discovered we call it growth hacking, which is a form of digital marketing where you make it work with limited resource. And I thought, this is my bread and butter, because I'm working within a community that has very limited resource, but digital marketing and the data part is the real leverage we have. And then that's how I kind of built my reputation. So from Mixed It Madness, my friend Andy went on to become a venture capitalist at Backstage Capital. So he funded black-owned businesses, and obviously he made introductions of the work I'd done. And then it just kept spiraling. And then people I worked with on one startup that he invested in then left to work at another startup. And they just be like, oh, that guy did a great job. And yeah, so it just kind of spiraled.
Is networking a pivotal part of digital marketing then?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say, I think people struggle to network. I think the younger generation are struggling more than the older generation. I would argue, yes. I think they're very like, I'm going to do this video, it's going to go viral. They're not really building relationships, you know? Whereas I think older demographics are more like, you know, you go to an event, you have a conversation with somebody, and you realize your network isn't actually going to a network event. Your network could be you work in this job and you've built a rapport, and then, you know, think people know about you and all that kind of stuff. So I think digital marketing is harder to network nowadays, because especially following 2020 lockdown, people are kind of working for themselves. Freelancers are working, so you don't get to meet people, even though they work in co-working spaces. It just seems very cubicle, like, you know what I mean? And it's something we're trying to overcome, because I'm seeing a growth in loneliness for a lot of digital marketers and nomads, as they call them, right? People that work for themselves. So something we do every other Thursday, we have something called pull-up sessions, where people can just come to our office, we order some Wingstops, and sometimes there's a topic, sometimes there isn't. And your community are welcome to come you know, and we just got an office in North London, so I can send details. And it's just free workspace. Come, the food is free. Sometimes we have a topic to discuss, sometimes we don't, we're just chilling. And selfishly, it's been a great recruitment thing for me because I've met really good, talented people who I'm like, oh, we need somebody to help with that. Let's get on this project. And then you end up finding out this person that seemed very shy when they first came because they didn't know anyone else is actually really good at this thing. And so, and it's something that I'm going to lean on a bit more around creating spaces, and would love to partner with you guys, people that already have existing communities. How can we just, because there could be somebody listening here that, you know, could help out. So I think networking is, to just summarize, it's quite tough for digital marketers because a lot of them are going into that freelance thing. I'm working from home. You know, until I flew out to New York, I'd never met my US clients face to face. So I've made it super conscious decision to fly out there, and it was the best investment. We talked about family. I might be going back in August and going to Disneyland. They're like, oh, we can bring all our families. You build relationships. And I realized, gosh, my business has grown because I was able to build relationships. And especially for young people, I'm trying to encourage them that not everything's transactional. There's people I've known for 8 years and I've never done business with them. And then one day they see a stories post and they're like, oh, I work in this organization. We're looking for a digital marketer. It's a long game. It's a long game. Yeah.
We've been running our event, our meetup, for 19 years. It was 19 years on the 16th of April. And everybody comes to the event, and I've noticed it, like when you said about younger people, they want instant gratification. So if they're there to find a life partner, they're like, oh, he's not here. You know, you're like, you know, you've only been to one meetup. Or if they're there to find, you know, business, etc., they come and they pitch everybody. And I've always said to them, that's not how networking for me works. It's like you get to, again, it boils down to what we said at the beginning about trust. You get to know people, you get to like people in a social space. And then, like you say, 8 years later, you're like, oh my God, I know so-and-so does that thing. And so then you'll reach out because you feel safe that person will actually, you know, do what you said that they will do. And I think that is something that potentially as a culture we need to do more of, is that
100%.
thing of like, yeah, it's the relationship is not a transactional only relationship. It has to be a relationship where it can just be shooting the breeze, talking about the kids and, you know, like favorite spots in London or New York. It's like, you know, actually I find out more about people from where they eat. I'm kind of like, yeah. Oh, okay. Not for me, but you know, it's good for you. So it's those conversations, and I think that's probably where we are slightly lacking, is that thing of not having built those. So yeah, last week we met up for our 19th anniversary, and there've been people that have been in the meetup for like 12 years, 14 years, etc., and they still come along, you know, like not all the time but occasionally, and that's all you need is that that drop in. So where do you see translate culture in, let's say, 5 years? Because you're actually already starting to move a little bit away from, like you say, smaller businesses. So you're now like 7-8 figures, but then, you know, you're sort of doing kind of a lot of this kind of almost like academy coaching type stuff. So where do you see it being in like 5 years compared to now?
I would want kind of what I'm seeing. There's so many opportunities that are coming with the businesses as we're going. And even speaking on that network thing, there's people who come to our events who connected us to businesses that are not from the community, and it's opening up new opportunities. I think for us, is that trust element is key, and wherever that sort of takes us. But in terms of giving a more tangible response, we're definitely going to be more international business. We just see huge opportunities in the US. Like we just started working with a legacy black hair care brand, which many people will know of, and helping them digitalize has been very rewarding. And knowing that that case study, when it comes out to the world, is going to be mind-blowing, and what doors that could open in terms of some of the bigger multinational black-owned brands that we could work with is just incredible. And then the translating culture aspect of it as well also means just seeing the impact that we can have, like I mentioned, with brands that are not necessarily black owned, but are trying to target our audience, just doing a better job at it. But also, one of our partners that we just recently started working with said to us they want to grow in Africa. They want to start growing in emerging markets. And I know, obviously I've got a digital background, but I know in emerging markets, it's all about relationships, right? So then it's like, that's not going to be about me sending an email to somebody. That's going to be about me calling somebody back home and being like, hey, auntie, do you know someone who's, and make those introductions. So it's very interesting to see like traditional British businesses looking at international expansion and building customers in continent and stuff. So to answer that, I think there's something there around us being almost a trusted custodian partner with a wide range of companies, not just digital marketing, but building those cultural trusts in terms of products, services, and potentially essentially international trade. That's kind of like what I'm looking to sort of grow the business towards.
I think the thing about emerging markets from Africa, so digitally, I think it's Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa. Are there any others that, I mean, obviously I've kept only sub-Saharan, but are there any others that are sort of coming out that we're not hearing about as much?
Yeah, I would say you've hit the nail on the head. Those are like the more prominent ones. And I guess it's probably easier for us to say because they're probably English speaking. So we have that affinity. I have less of an affinity with, some Congolese. But what's really fascinating is, I don't know much about North Africa, I'll be brutally honest, but I will say the adoption of TikTok in Africa is very rapid, and the adoption of mobile in Africa has been very rapid because obviously we've not had the infrastructure of landlines and stuff like that. So, and we're the youngest continent in the world. That's the thing people seem to forget, right? So I think naturally what's going to end up happening is we're going to start seeing a lot more trends that are starting in Africa. So we're seeing a lot of, especially Amapiano, some of the stuff that's doing really well in music and Afrobeats and stuff like that. So to answer your question, I think those key countries you've highlighted are like super influential, and obviously the adoption of technology there has been super cool. I think what I would love to see more is is a bit more of like obviously, I guess this depends in terms of consumer spend, but also just a bit of respect in terms of the quality of the products we give people back home. Because I think historically it's been like really low standard stuff, but I think, I think there's an opportunity there to, I made a joke the other day. I was like, when I was trying to explain this whole thing about the black consumer, not necessarily just having to be a black owned brand, I was like, Vicks Vapor Rub, for example, is probably one of the most loved brand across all black diaspora, right? I don't know who owns it, right? They probably don't even know. Well, they probably do know because they probably see the money that comes from the continent. But it's like, I've got this poster in my house, which my wife has, which is like, believe in yourself like a Jamaican parent believes in Vicks Vapor. And I was like, you could change that to Ghana, South Africa. So it's all in these kind of, and we're very loyal people. You do right by a black consumer. You don't have to market to them again. And I think that's one of the key things we really want to translate to businesses is like, do right by us. We'll stick with you. And especially with youth culture and everything. So I'm super fascinated, and I need to spend a bit more time in the continent myself. I haven't really been a lot, but I do get a lot of, we for example, one of our graphic designers is in Ghana. So we do employ people back in the continent, which I think it's something that more of us should do. And you mentioned Kwanda. I'm also a villager there. Actually, actually know Jermaine. Funny enough, the WhatsApp group that I started was inspired by Jermaine. So I sat with him, went for lunch. He used to have a direct consumer brand. He's like, oh, why don't we start a WhatsApp group? So he's actually part of my journey. He's a great guy. But yeah, stuff like that. I just think, the whole charity aspect is great. But I think charity also comes from giving people opportunities. So I think the employability of the continent is something that we should look into as well.
Yeah, so I typically I only have one employee. Everybody else is like Philippines, Nigeria, South Africa. So very much trying to sort of keep it off the thing. And I think what's going to happen is that we're going to see a lot more like back office type businesses coming out of there. They've tried, I'm in the care space, so they've tried it in the care space, and it works almost as well as it would, outsourcing anywhere else. But then there's a cultural sort of like divide a little bit, like people there, if you're in Uganda or wherever, not quite understanding how care works in the UK because they don't have that thing. So there is something around sort of like, how do you bridge that gap so that people there can deliver services to the same quality and people don't feel like, oh, I'm speaking to someone who has no idea, know, what I like as a British consumer of care or a parent or somebody who requires care. So I think, we are going to see that shift around services, but also Africa, I think you're going to see a lot more brands. So we get them, like Ladum is like a fashion brand from South Africa, etc. They come out and then something happens where I think they don't quite sort of like have the sustainability yet. And I don't know if that's around what you said earlier about the operations and, the logistics not being 100%, in alignment with the marketing. But there's something around those brands not lasting very long. But I think hopefully in the next 20 years, you'll see the sustainability of African brands, and they'll become almost like household names maybe in 100%. The diaspora. But who knows? I mean, it's all very, up in the air. But okay, we could talk for days, I think, between us. But is there sort of anything in terms of like what you would, like one piece of advice you would give somebody who is like, I've just started a business and I need to sort of get my digital marketing sorted, like, a quick response sort of to that?
Quick response. Yeah, I think it goes back to that point when you asked me, what do black entrepreneurs in the UK don't do as well? I know it's so uncomfortable for a lot of people, but being more visible, being bolder, being more visible. You'd be super surprised how many people are actually waiting to hear your voice. And it doesn't need much. You just pick up a phone and you post. So what I do is when I go for my walks in the morning, I will just pick up my phone and I will record a 1 to 3 minute video. And you watch it back. If you don't like it, you don't post it. But if you come, it's like a gym. Like in the gym, you go for a walk for a day or fitness. Practice. And I practice for 5. I used to have a private Instagram page where I would share my thoughts with my friends. And what happened is over the years, my friends, make it public. I was like, no, I post my kids and whatever. So now it's second nature to me. So I would say just share your dreams, share what you're working on. Especially on TikTok. people want your face on TikTok. So I did a post, sorry to interrupt. I did a post where I didn't post my face. And even though it was very interesting, did very well on Instagram, it tanked on TikTok because they just want to see your face, right? They want to see that rough and rugged stuff. So really understand what works on each platform. So sometimes I post on both platforms, I see what works, and I double down on what works there. So I would say experiment, because the social media tools are out there. And obviously, if you're in a product-based business, really look at the back end, partner with the people that are experts in those areas.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think you're right, actually. It's experimenting and it's training yourself.
Yes.
So when I was learning blogging, I was blogging every day for years. Whereas some people kind of like, they blog once a month and they're like, why didn't they go?
Exactly.
Because you blog once a month, you know, and it's probably not quite there yet in terms of your audience and your voice, etc. as a blogger. So I think, yeah. So where can people find you? Because I think what they'll find most interesting, aside from your digital marketing agency, is also, like you say, the directory that you're going to have, and also kind of this open spaces where they can come and drop it. I think that would be really useful for people.
Yeah, that'll be super helpful. So they can follow us on Translate Culture on Instagram. Our website is obviously translateculture.co. We also run an event called Direct to Culture, which we've got one on July the 18th. So I'm happy to send Max and the team. I'll send you some discount codes if any of your community want to come. I'd love to invite you as well if you're around. This year's theme is taking luck out of the equation, which basically means we're bringing different members of our past customers, past colleagues, coming to basically tell you the playbook on how to succeed in different industries, from food to media to e-com and stuff like that. So I'd love to invite your community to that. If you follow us on translateculture.co, to Translate Culture Instagram, a lot of it will be announced there, and obviously we'll share it with the BIC community as well.
All right, brilliant. Thank you so much.